all, I'm Jamie Lynn Sigler, a mom, actor, and advocate. I know how overwhelming it can be trying to decide which treatment is right for you. I've been there. But you should know you're not alone. You can do this. Start with some research, talk to the community, and most importantly, don't be afraid to ask your doctor questions. You might find results that speak for themselves. That's how I landed on Kesimpta. Ask your doctor if Kesimpta, ofatumumab, could be right for you. You can check out the details at kesimpta.com.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Commercial Insurance. Business owners, meet Progressive Insurance. They make it easy to get discounts on commercial auto insurance and find coverages to grow with your business. Quote in as little as 6 minutes at progressivecommercial.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company. Coverage provided and serviced by affiliated and third-party insurers. Discounts and coverage selections not available in all states or situations.
How's it going? You're listening to 101 Part-Time Jobs with me, Giles Bidder. Thank you for being here. This is the show where we hear from musicians and artists about their different ideas behind what work is. And I mean, writing a song, that's work, but what about all the other work that goes into it that you have to do now? So that's what we're doing here. We're finding out the stories around the record. And on today's episode, we hear from Jeffrey Lewis. Jeffrey's just put out his new album, The Freewheelin Jeffrey Lewis, or the even more freewheeling Jeffrey Lewis, I should say. And we figured out, well, I thought he put out a lot of records because I feel like he's been around for a long, long time, which he has. But I think there's a bit of a Jeffrey Lewis effect, as we find out here. But the record's out now. He's on tour. He's just coming over from France at the moment to the UK. And if you're in the UK, you can catch him in London, Leicester, Cambridge, Leeds, Glasgow, Newcastle, Sheffield, Cardiff, Bristol, Margate, and then he's back in Belgium, in Brussels. So that's a proper UK tour, isn't it? So this is Jeffrey Lewis speaking about everything he does behind the scenes on 101 Part-Time Jobs. Thank you so much for being here. If you enjoy this episode, make sure you click subscribe. And if you're able to leave a review on Spotify or Apple, that would be much appreciated. Jeffrey's here after the jump. Cheers. 101 Part-Time Jobs. Sun Estrella Galicia's Dot to Dot warm-up show will be headlined by Big Special on the 5th of May at Oslo and Hackney. Big Special, if you don't know them, are excellent. You might have heard them on the new Black Mirror or seen photos from their massive sold-out show at Kentish Town Forum recently. Sun Estrella Galicia are the independent, family-owned, music-loving brewery with a particular interest in sustainability and community. And in their warm-up for their partnership with Dot to Dot Festival, where you can catch Fat Dog, Jasmine 40, Sprints, and loads of other great bands. This is a one-off chance to see Big Special at the intimate and independent Oslo venue in Hackney. 5th of May, Big Special, warming up Dot to Dot Festival in partnership with Sun Estrella Galicia. Get your tickets before they're gone from Dice. From a young age, I knew I wasn't going to do like a regular job. I knew that just wasn't me. Although I wouldn't have said it then. I wouldn't have been able to articulate it then. It took me years to work that out and say it out loud. But those places and hanging out in those places, whether it was a pub where bands would play every night, and you could kind of glean that there was a promoter there were people who ran the bar, there were people who did the sound. You know, at the comic book store, there were people who worked there, obviously. There's in any of these youth clubs, there are people that operate it, and it's their lives to operate it. I think, looking back on now, I can probably say that made me think, oh, this is the way I want to live, and not in the office, which is quite a big generalization. But you strike me as someone who, you know, working a normal job, it was like, you strike me as someone who you were made to make art. You were born to make art and create.
Well, I I had some jobs in, college and after college, but I've really just been, I haven't had another job really since, uh, I guess like 2001 or something like that. Uh, I Once I started booking tours, that really became pretty all-consuming.
And
The
that is a
amount,
job. That is a hell of a
yeah,
job.
yeah, and especially in those early years, it was harder. It was, but I don't even understand why my time would be so consumed currently with non-creative hours each day. It seems as though I have enough uh, teams in place currently. I have enough systems. I have enough experience where the actual literal hours of sending out emails, hoping to get responses, trying to find other clubs to contact, trying to figure out how we're going to get from this city to that city, trying to figure out where we're going to sleep this night, that night, the next night. Um, I don't really, I always felt like, there could be some time when I could spend those hours drawing comic books instead. But the pandemic was actually a really interesting science experiment to show me this dream of like, oh, if only I wasn't, how much art could I get done? How much songwriting could I get done if all I did was just stay at home and, have all day, every day to just work on my stuff? And that was a very fascinating, maybe once in a lifetime experience of you find out that it's not an infinite amount. All your dreams about the novel you would write if you just had a year and a half to be stuck in your apartment. The pandemic was kind of the actual closest we'll probably get to
Yeah.
finding out exactly what you would get done
Yeah.
in that circumstance. So, yeah, I did get a lot of stuff done during the pandemic, but it certainly wasn't the colossal amount. It wasn't like, oh, if I wasn't involved in X, Y, and Z, I could get so much more done on my comics and my songwriting. I did get a lot more done than normal, but it was still a certain finite amount. Like, okay, I did a comic book issue, I did, this and that, but there's still so much to do every
Yeah.
day. But yeah, I'm definitely more involved in a lot of the administrative end of manufacturing records, manufacturing my comic books, shipping them out for my concerts, figuring out where I'm going to put them. I have 2 storage rooms now in New York City. I'm trying to figure out, okay, is there room to put a couple more boxes of comic books in this storage room? Is the Brooklyn storage room starting to run low on this particular record,
Yeah.
this particular poster? I'm sold out of these records. Is it time to start reprinting them? If I start doing another printing, are they going to be ready in time for September when I do such and such a tour? So there's just many, many moving pieces, and it seems like no matter how sophisticated and how much things grow and how many different people I'm working with, there's always the amount of tasks grows with it. But I
Yeah.
guess I like it. I somehow, part of me just gets excited about it, and it has become a thing that I get as excited about as anything else.
You'd be I mean, you do, like you said, he's got a lot of plates spinning there. You'd be a great project manager. You are a
Well,
project manager.
I basically am. You're kind of looking at how great or not great a project manager I am. I obviously wish I was significantly better at it. I did not, for example, get a new comic book issue finished within the 2024 year. I got one out in 2022. I got one out in 2023. I was really hoping I would get the next issue out in 2024. But here we are. It's already April of 2025. So we're sort of, we could say, getting into halfway done with 2025. And I'm significantly behind on, I guess it's just the kind of dawning realization of like, oh, post-pandemic life is back, and I can't really expect that. There's a lot of other things happening that do occupy the hours of the day, and things just, there's only so many hours in a day.
The feeling that I get from your audience is that they feel involved in you. You know, there's much like your comics where things are happening, it's busy, there's lots of different characters. That feels like your audience, that feels like your fan base. And it's funny when I think about you doing all those different jobs, I think of feeling part of it. You know, because you get that experience through the records. Obviously, the records are quite busy lyrically. Being a Jeffrey Lewis fan is like being involved in it.
That might be a kind of a natural outgrowth of the fact that only people that are more involved with trying to find interesting music would even find my stuff in the first place. It's not readily pushed in front of people's faces. Only the kind of person that might be curious to find what weird things are out there. You know that if you are just walking around in a supermarket, a grocery store, you'll hear a certain kind of music. And then if you seek out music, maybe you'll find another layer of music. I'm so many layers down that for somebody to be aware of the comic books that I make and the songs that I make, only the kind of person that is significantly more involved in those things would ever find that I exist, I think. So it's just by a natural process, the people that are willing to dig that far into culture to find, oh, here's this weird guy, Jeffrey, he makes these weird things. Only a certain kind of person has dug that far into the loam and the, you know, into the dirt of what's out there.
Yet you've made a living doing it. You know, you're within this underground subculture, whatever you want to call it, and you've made a living doing probably one of the hardest things you can try and make a living doing.
It's astonishing to me that I have made a living at it, and I'm, you know, in a certain way, I've it seems like I'm kind of coasting on that. For, you know, it always, for many years, it was kind of like, well, okay, I'm making a living this year, but I don't know how long this will last. But now it's been going on for so long that it still feels like, I don't know, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, can this all still be working? But it has been working for so many years that I kind of now I'm able to look back on my life and be like, this is what I've done for the last, you know, more than 20 years. And that is quite odd. But by the same token, it's not as though what I do is, so at least to my mind, I think what I do is kind of appealing. I feel as though it's not off-putting, and I'm not like a noise band. I'm not
Gigi Allen.
Yeah, there's nothing essentially unappealing about either the comic books or the music that I do. I think they're really quite accessible. I think they are actually about things. They're touching, they're thought-provoking, they're often, you know, there's humor, there's a lot of different kinds of emotions, and I'm really interested in engagement, and really what is so captivating about when I listen to music that really captivates me, when I read comic books that I'm just like, I can't wait to read the next issue of such and such. You know, I that kind of passion and that kind of interest, I think, you know, I'm not the greatest of all time in terms of, there are better songwriters than me, there's better artists than me, there's better writers than me, but I'm just trying to do something that I think is really, really, really good. I'm not trying to do something that is horrible or abrasive.
And you're not trying to be underground.
No, I mean, I'm just trying to do something that to me seems like the most obvious good thing. If I was looking for a band or a comic book, I would be my own biggest fan. I'd be like, that is what I want from a band. That is what I want from a comic book. And it's, I think it's fairly likable. I think it's just, it doesn't have that much exposure because there's a lot of, well, I don't know. I mean, I'm not the most visually appealing guy. It's not as though I've never been like a fashionable or hip visual thing
Well,
in
you got
terms
some
of,
very nice blonde hair, very nice bleached hair.
well, the couple strands that remain, I don't know, that nobody's interested in a bald 49-year-old white male with an acoustic guitar. Even, I remember somebody saying like, oh, even, people in the music industry, it's always like they're interested in the new and shiny thing. But the problem with you, Jeffrey, is that you weren't shiny even when you were new. Um, so
There's a lot of visuals that go into the music industry, and actually doing this podcast more and more, having to see myself on screen. It does change something in your chemistry, in your relationship to you. And I imagine when you are an artist, you're constantly seeing photos and videos of yourself. I mean, you'd have to be made of steel to not have those thoughts of, oh, what do I look like, go through your head.
yeah, and I think, and this might just be my own like paranoia, but I feel like there's I feel like there's articles about me where I'm kind of like, I think the point of this is that people that are like as unattractive as me aren't supposed to make a living in the music business. Like I'm like, oh, this is, on one hand, this is a sign of good press, but at the same time, it's also kind of insulting because they're kind of like,
Yeah.
isn't it amazing that somebody like Jeffrey Lewis is able to survive when he's he's ugly and weird and unappealing.
That's incredibly
and,
rude.
yeah, I mean, but that's what you get, when you're in the public eye. I mean, I could have just become a subway conductor, and then I wouldn't be doing. You sort of put yourself out there as an artist. You're saying inherently, pay attention in this direction. I'm making this comic. I'm making this song. So when you're inviting attention in your direction, it's going to be all sorts of attention, some positive, some negative, and you have to just kind of accept that that's part of the package.
And of course, this is one of the jobs of being an artist, right? Because I feel like writing songs or making comics, it's like, okay, how do I keep focus? How do I not get distracted by particular things? Of course, the whole thing about what you're doing is almost, it's just littered with distractions.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the case for, I think, everybody. And we might say that we are more suffused with distractions nowadays than in the past, but I think it was always the case. I think, when I was growing up in the 80s, it was, people would say, oh, people watch TV all the time, or there's, oh, MTV is destroying people's brains. People are but it's always something. I mean, if it's either social, the world is 100% full of distractions and there's 10 million things you can do other than sit at a desk and draw a comic book. That's always the case. So the people that are able to just do one thing and keep doing it hour after hour after hour after day after week after month after year, that it's like focus is like an Olympics game. It's an Olympic sport that the people that are really good at these things are just like Olympic masters of focus and saying no to other things.
What do you think has been, how do you think you've been able to do it? Did you find a place in New York that was like affordable? Could you arrange your life in a way that you could prioritize music and making comics? When you look back on, and of course you got this documentary coming out, you must have done some reflecting recently. When you look back on that time, like what elements of your life do you think allowed you to be the Jeffrey Lewis who releases albums and makes comics?
Well, there's a few answers to that. For one thing, yes, I do have cheap rent. That's been an important factor. I mean, there were various times at different places that I lived where, rent was more of a stress, but cheap rent has definitely been a big. When I first got out of college, I lived in a place that was very cheap, and then for about the last 12 years, I've lived in a place that was very cheap. There were times in between there where that was more of a stress and having to move, trying to find affordable apartments, rent going up and up and up. But at the same time, I was still able to find ways to, survive through those periods as well. One thing that I think has been a huge factor in my survival is having extremely low standards. I think just the way that I was raised with very, low expectations, low, no money in the family. I was never on an airplane until I was 20. If I went on my father would always just be riding his motorcycle around. If I went on motorcycle trips with him, it was always just, he was always fixing his own motorcycle that he had for, decades. He might have the same vehicle for, 30 years. And just if you were just sleeping in a sleeping bag out on, even paying $8 to stay in a campground, that was to be avoided. It was like, oh, we can just sleep in this field or stay at friends' houses, eat a can of beans. That was just very normal to me. So when I started touring and the kind of travels that I would be doing, I think a lot of other people would have considered that to be a failure, but it didn't seem like a failure to me if we were sleeping, if you're sleeping on the street, if you're sleeping on somebody's floor, if you're, not eating anything fancy, if you're, eating a loaf of bread and a can of soup for 99 cents from the, a lot of things that some people might say, oh, I tried to be an artist, but I failed. I had to eat I was living on 99-cent cans of soup. It was a failure. To me, that didn't feel like a failure. I mean, even now, a lot of things that I might go through might not meet somebody else's standards of, they might look at what I see as success and they would see it as failure, but I just didn't have that kind of standards. I feel like I was able to live through and endure a lot of circumstances that didn't seem strange to me. They just seemed normal to me.
That's so interesting, because if you think of starting a rock and roll band, of course you look at Guns N' Roses or Metallica or whoever, these stadium rock bands, and you think, oh, well, if I'm not making loads of money and if I'm not doing the things that those bands did, then I'm a failure. Those are the bands that magazines, TV have told us were the levels of success. So if that doesn't apply to you, then you're just on your own path.
And you have to sort of stay on your path through it. In my experience, at least, I mean, it happens differently for everybody, I imagine, but just keep on your path even when, if two people are coming to your gig, some people would say, oh, this is a disaster. But to me, I'm like, oh, my God, there's two people that actually have heard of me here and they want to come see me. That's amazing. Even for the first few years of touring, there were years where we wouldn't have had enough money to rent a vehicle for touring. We always just would ask the fans who can drive us, and people would volunteer and say, yeah, that sounds like fun. I have some days off of work. I have a car. Can you guys fit in this car with me? I'll drive you on these 5 days of the tour. That was we did that for years. So a lot of things that you just, and also there's a certain pride in I think it's interesting that rock and roll has at least some aesthetic of where like that kind of grubbiness is sort of cool. You can take some pride in being in the toughness of what you've endured, whereas maybe certain other genres, I don't know, if you were like in rap, rap doesn't boast about having a crappy gig where you don't get paid. They seem to boast about making lots of money and having nice clothes and drinking fine beverages. So in a certain way, there's a contradiction if you're not living that lifestyle. But in the kinds of music that I'm interested in making, there isn't that much of a contradiction. The grubbiness and the times of failure, you're sort of like, oh yeah, this is for real. I'm really in a DIY indie rock band. We're making, my recordings sound crappy. Right on. Like that's the real deal. It's not a contradiction. It's not a failure. But, at this point, it's been many years where I've been, if I look back on the really tough years of it, that was like, a while ago. I've sort of gotten used to, at this point, I can expect there to be more people at the gigs. I can expect more people to be checking out what I do, where I can pay my bandmates a bit more. At this point, where, we can rent a nicer vehicle. We can rent vehicles at all. We can, there might be, I've sort of gotten used to a higher standard now. But I feel as though if that fell apart, if less people like my next record, or if less people are coming to gigs, less people are buying my comics, I know that I can survive a lower level of existence. So yeah, I don't know what, or anybody with a long career, they might see various ups and downs.
Yeah, and that longevity of it all fascinates me because the world moves so fast, the industry moves so fast, internet, music, trends, everything is always moving. So that makes me think, how does one just stay in their lane? You know, have you been writing about the similar things? Has your idea about what you do, has that changed over the years?
I mean, I've developed in various ways and I've gotten interested in a few different things, but I think essentially my guiding lights remain the same. I want to make, Daniel Johnston remains my kind of guiding light as a principle of songwriting, what songwriting is, what I want from a song. If I want to make a song, that's kind of my gold standard of a song. And that has remained the same. That was what my original inspiration to make songs and recordings in the first place. And that still remains like, does this meet that test? And essentially the same in my comic books. I feel like 8 Ball, Dan Clowes' comic book 8 Ball, and maybe to some extent the comics of Rick Veitch, who's a little bit more obscure than Daniel Clowes, but I feel like those are kind of my idols. They were my idols back in the 90s when I was first sort of developing, doing the things that I'm still doing now. And they basically remain my idols. That hasn't really shifted that much. When I'm doing something, I want to do something that those people would appreciate and be proud of. If I were to, bump into one of them in this, or if I were to see my favorites, if I were to somehow be able to give my album to Jonathan Richman or give my comic book to Daniel Clowes, I would want those people to recognize, like, yeah, you are on the path that you're sort of aiming somewhere in the same place. And that's always been the case for me. I mean, so yeah, my methods and certain stylistic things, my own abilities have changed a lot. I can certainly sing and play better now. I know I have a lot more options of what I can do, but the challenge of to try to get to the place that I'm aiming for, it seems pretty consistent for me, I think.
Yeah. And Jonathan Richman, Daniel Johnston, I feel like you've probably released more material than either of them in your career, in your life as a musician. I mean, both those guys, they kind of came in and out, didn't they?
Well, I'm not sure why people have a perception of me of being so prolific. I don't see myself being very prolific. I know certain artists who are prolific, and I really don't think I'm one of them. I just put out my album.
I mean, how many albums do you have out? What, probably 16, 20?
Not, it depends what you consider an album. I mean, I write songs that I don't consider a fit. It's sort of like, just because I draw a lot of stuff in a sketchbook doesn't mean that they all count as like real drawings. I mean, I might make a lot of songs, but it's just because they don't really count. The albums that I consider like the actual real albums, I mean, maybe there's
11, Spotify says.
Yeah.
So.
And considering that, this material goes back to, I started making these songs in late 1997, 1998. We're talking, it's not that far from 30 years at this point. It's certainly been 25 years. And 11 albums. I mean, didn't Bob Dylan get to album 11 within, 7 years? You look at the way people made stuff, and also the comic books. It's like I just said, I haven't managed to finish the 3rd issue of my series. It's been over a year and a half just to finish one single issue. I mean, that's you're supposed to do a comic issue every month, or
It's the Mandela effect.
It's what is that?
Mandela effect is because everyone thought that Nelson Mandela had died in prison, but he didn't. He survived after prison. He came out of prison and was alive. But the Mandela effect is the idea that because it was just common consensus that, I thought he died in jail. No, he didn't. He was. So if there can be a common collective idea that Jeffrey Lewis is prolific. That's the idea.
Well, I think some of this comes from Wikipedia, there's some incorrect information on my Wikipedia page, and
I would like to hold up my hand and say I did not look at your Wikipedia before doing this. I would find that's insulting.
Well, yeah, I think there's just wrong information on there. There's people say like, oh, your Wikipedia page says you have like 40 albums out. But, it lists a lot of things that aren't really albums. It's like, oh, just because that's like 3 songs or that's a re-release of the same old thing. Yeah, I feel like, when you're saying there's like 11 albums plus a couple of side projects, that sounds more accurate to me.
Yeah. I'm looking at your Wikipedia now, and there's a lot of bullet points. There does say a lot of albums there, doesn't it? Yeah. It's funny because anyone can write them, right? Anyone can edit it.
Yeah. So, there's a certain thing where these things work against you, where somebody says, oh, there's this guy, Jeffrey Lewis, and he's been going for 25 years, and I've never heard of him. He must be really terrible. Or there's this guy, Jeffrey Lewis, I've heard he has a lot of albums out. He must be terrible. It's like the fact of the longevity and putting out all this stuff and still not being known. I feel like that would automatically tell me like, oh, that artist must really not be that good.
To me, it says they've kept on going, and maybe like if I haven't heard of them yet, then that's my problem. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah, well, it's also off-putting in the sense that if I hear of some artist and they have 30 albums, I'm like, oh, I don't even know where to start. I don't even want to start. But if somebody says, oh, you got to check this person out, and they have 1 album or 2 albums, then it's like, okay, I'll check. It's not intimidating.
What are you listening to recently? What's getting you excited?
Nothing modern. I don't listen to 21st century music for the most part. I'm always just trying to find weird 60s stuff. Since I was a teenager, I just had this interest in psychedelic music, and that to some degree branched off into trying to find different, sometimes garage rock, sometimes psychedelic, sometimes more folky type stuff. So, I just came back from a 2-week USA tour, and I was able to go to a couple record stores, and I bought a number. And I'm always just looking for cheap stuff, so I just buy stuff if it's cheap and if it looks interesting. And once in a while, I'll find something that I think is like, wow, this is kind of interesting and cool. I don't even know what this is, but so that's most of what I listen to.
Buying records because they're cheap and they look interesting is a good reason as any other.
Yeah. I do love The Fall. I have like every album by The Fall. That's one of my favorite bands. So, but I just have a lot of music in the house. And I'm of the generation where I have the album. So I have a lot of CDs. I have a lot of records. I have a lot of, whoever it is, whether it's Pete Seeger, Joan Baez, Sonic Youth, Michael Hurley. I've got I've been, since Michael Hurley died, I've just been listening. I have a whole stack of Michael Hurley records. A lot of 60s psychedelic garage rock compilations. The Pebble series of 60s psychedelic compilation records. That's some of my favorite stuff. The Back from the Grave garage rock compilations. That's some of my favorite stuff. So it's a lot of that. It's very little from the 21st century. There's very few modern things. And if I do listen to modern things, they're almost all bands that started much earlier. If I want to go see Yo La Tengo, I might want to go see Stereolab. I'm going to go see Bonnie Prince Billy. I might want to check out the new album by any one of these people, Jonathan Richman. It's it's kind of the same people that have been around. That's most of the time, if I listen to modern stuff, if I try to check out some new act, I might think it's okay. I might even think it's good, but it doesn't fill me with a strong urge to run out and buy their record and, they're coming back to town, I need to buy tickets. There's really nobody. It's a shame. I wish I didn't have that reaction, but yeah.
Talking earlier about how you might have been going for so long, but there are some people lots of people who've never heard of you. There would have been lots of people who hadn't heard of The Fool as well. I wonder what, I mean, I did read Marky Smith's book, and I'm sure he probably spoke about this, but I wonder what Marky Smith thought about that, and his philosophy on that part of being an artist.
Well, my impression from the stuff that I've read is that he was very workmanlike about it, and you just you just work. You write more songs because that's your job. You play gigs because that's your job, but you also have a kind of fierce adherence to your vision of what you think is awesome and what you think is like the greatest thing that you can do, and you just work at that. I think there's there's a certain kind of infantilism that's tied in with the kind of rock and roll mythos of you get into music because you don't want to work. You want to be lazy. You want to just do drugs and, be a mess and have a sink full of dishes that you don't do. There's kind of a laziness or a whatever you want to call it. It's
almost like a
privilege.
Reticence to be part of society.
Yeah, but even as applied to work, it's not even cool to work on your own stuff, to treat your own stuff in a, focused way, the way that, somebody who is a worker treats their stuff, just has to work 8 hours a day or 12 hours a day, whatever the case is. And my impression is that Marky Smith, and certainly his body of work, holds this out, that he would just make a new Fall album. They would just make a new album. They'd write new songs, and some were better than others, but that was just part of the process. That's like a writer writes. That's, an artist makes art. That's just what they do, and that's your job, and that's that's interesting because it's kind of almost not normally part of what you think of in rock and roll. I think somebody like, you look at Chuck Berry, who's like the icon of rock and roll, but at a certain point he was like, okay, I have my kind of 25 songs, and now I'm just going to keep playing those songs for the rest of my life. They're not just going back to the notebook and go every day and writing another one and working on another one and trying to figure out something else. But there's but that's in comic books. The people who make comic books, they are, somebody like Jack Kirby, he just worked. He was at his work desk every day making a new comic page. What is this story? What's the new thing? And you just crank it. That's just your job. I mean, he had a family. He had mouths to feed, wife and kids, a house, a car, whatever. And that's the job. You go to the office and you work on that. And that appeals to me. I really like that kind of thing.
Yeah, Nick Cave used to wake up and get into a suit, and I think still does, to write.
That I like that idea. That's that's and not everything you write is going to be the best thing you've ever written. But I think if you're focused and if you have a vision of what you think is really great, then hopefully, or like filmmakers, I mean, God, how many films that for some reason Woody Allen is still he wants to work and make films, and for some reason, whoever, you could point to certain people that are just, they are lifers. They want to just make more. Yeah. They enjoy, or they have a sense of a sense of industriousness for some reason.
And you're a lifer?
I guess it's a little hard for me to parse that out because I do need to. It's not as though I can just retire. I think if I had the money of certain successful artists, then you wonder would I keep working this hard if I just had enough money to live on for the rest of my life? But I think there's an emotional enjoyment to making something that you feel really excited about. That's kind of irreplaceable. And I've often said that it just feels like a sort of addiction, or a certain gambling addiction, where you're continually back at the gambling table, and you might lose and lose and lose. You might make one song after another, or one drawing after another that you feel is bad, and it feels so bad. But the one time that you hit, where you do something that you feel really good about, feels so great. It's such a high that it just keeps you going. It keeps you going back to that gambling table. And you're kind of just addicted to the game in that sense.
Yeah.
And I love that feeling. It's such a terrible feeling when you're just cranking you're confronted with your own mediocrity, day after day, you're just like, oh, I'm a terrible artist, I'm a terrible writer. But if you just somehow can eat all that dirt and just, confront that horrible feeling of how terrible you are, how much less good you are than you want to be at these things, and just do it anyway, just stick your face in that mud and just eat up that terrible feeling, you will at some point, hopefully, continually find something that you do get excited about. Yeah. And that, I'd like to think that's what keeps me going, because then when I find that thing, it's like, wow, I'm so glad, it keeps me going for another period of time.
I think that's good advice, whether you're an artist or not.
Yeah. Yeah. I imagine it's the same with a relationship, I think. If you're in a long-term relationship, if you're whatever it is, a sport probably.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you like a bad football team. I know a few people who do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Jeffrey, thank you so much for your time. I just got one question left, if that's all right.
Sure.
And working, plenty of people now, I feel like now's the time that even if you are in an office job or regular employment, now's the time where people just switch and change jobs all the time. It's not like the generation above us or our parents' generation where you'd get a job at 18 and stay there for 40 years. And I think one thing that comes from that way of living is that you make a lot of fuck ups because you're always new, you're always doing something for the first time, so you mess it up. Now, this could be a question for one of your regular employments back in the day, or it could be a Jeffrey Lewis music or comics thing. But I'm a big fan of Schadenfreude and hearing about other people's big work fuck ups, or those days that you think, oh my God, I just want this day to end. And I'm putting you on the spot here a little bit. And obviously this question has the danger, it runs the risk of raking over some unwanted memories. But does anything come to mind when I ask that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've screwed up so many things. And even, I feel like I play more bad gigs and write more bad songs than anybody with a career, should be allowed to do. I will continually put myself in situations where because I just have this sense that I want, I don't know, I write a different set list every night. I'm always trying to have my band do all these different things that maybe we're not rehearsed enough on. So there's, I want to keep that risk in there. And sometimes that does result in playing a bad show. And then that feels terrible. And that, especially when I've put so much time into trying to promote this gig and let's try, playing this bigger venue, or this is great. We've never had this many people come to our gig in Minneapolis before. It's the biggest ever gig we've played in Minneapolis. Why did I play this terrible, why did I choose those songs to play? I knew I wouldn't remember the lyrics to that one. Why did I humiliate myself by even trying it? And then I forgot the words. There's stuff like that happens all the time, and it feels terrible. But I don't know. I could avoid that, and I have learned over the years. I've avoided the worst excesses. I've certainly cleaned up my act in a lot of ways, where the bad shows aren't as bad as they used to be. But or opportunities that I've screwed up where somebody maybe would have wanted to do. I mean, there's tons of them, but I could think of one example off the top of my head where somebody was like, I think we should do a TV thing or some kind of program about you, Jeffrey, where we watch how you work and we do. I mean, this is like 15 years ago or something. And I'm always like, rather than going with it, I feel like I just really screwed it up because I was like, I think that's not going to be very interesting. Like, it's just not, I'm always like, I like sort of put all this effort into saying how boring it is. You really don't want to just have a camera. I'm just sitting at a desk. There's nothing cool. I feel like,
your own way.
Yeah, putting effort into, or just talking too much. Like, why did I even bother? Or like this interview, why am I saying so much?
Well, you're supposed to do that here.
Yeah, but I don't, like stuff where it's like, okay, if somebody's already interested in what I do, I can just screw it up by just talking and giving the wrong impression. If they already like what I do, just let that be. Like, don't do the interview. Don't tell them all the things that are unappealing about you. Just just okay, they like it, that's enough. Don't explain it. Don't, I feel like that is something that a lot of errors that I've made where maybe things could have worked out better for me if I hadn't ran my big mouth.
I think a lot of people can relate. Thanks, Jeffrey. Thanks for your time. And I like how much of a big Cribs fan you are. I love the Cribs.
Yeah, well, I was very lucky when they would take me and my brother Jack on tour. They really gave us a big leg up. They were very supportive. And we really owe them, quite a lot for they exposed us to a lot of audiences, both in England and in the United States. They took us on tour and multiple times. And they really didn't have to do that. They could have. There were certainly other acts they could have taken, and they gave us a lot of chances, and they were appreciative enough that it was a big help. And very nice guys. I still see them in different places. I see Gary when I'm out on the West Coast, and so things might have been different for me if the Cribs hadn't been in the picture.
Hey, thank you so much. I really appreciate it and love the new record. Really looking forward to watching the documentary. I appreciate you.
Cool, man. Thanks for getting in touch.
All right. See you later. So there was Jeffrey Lewis here on 101 Part-Time Jobs. His new album, The Even More Freewheelin Jeffrey Lewis, is out now, and you can catch him live in the UK this month. Thanks for being here. We've got episodes coming up with Patrick Wolf, Cornelia Murr, Lapsley, John Niven. Loads of great stuff coming up, so feel free to subscribe, and if you're able to leave a review, that'd be massively helpful. We're an independent music show and we want to keep on doing this. See you soon.
101 Part-Time Jobs is hosted by Giles Bidder and produced by me, Olivia Swash. This has been a Mighty Moon Media production.